Hello friends, welcome back. Hope you liked my last video and this time I'm bringing something more exciting than what we did last time. Today we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. There's a huge fuss around what artificial intelligence can do with the latest new technologies coming in generative AI. We probably have heard about ChatGPT by now. And I thought it makes sense to talk about that briefly, especially on the areas where it clearly helps the developers to do their job better. So today we're gonna briefly, or rather in detail, talk about GitHub Copilot. And I think a lot of people have heard about GitHub Copilot. However, today, from my perspective, I'm gonna talk about how GitHub Copilot helps SAP ABAP developers. There is not much talked. This is not much talked about topic because SAP has always been having its own product portfolio and are not exactly open when you compare with Python and JavaScript, etc. Right? However, there are some areas where GitHub Copilot does help SAP ABAP developers as well. So let's dig into it. So, what is GitHub Copilot? It's it's nothing but a cloud-based AI tool that converts a language into code. So you're writing something in English, giving it the instructions to the say let's call it robot, and it's converting that into a code, and that code would be SAP ABAP code. Whereas if you also write code as an input and you want more information about the code, it can also convert that back into the user friendly language. In this case, only English. And that's where the power of GitHub comes, converting language to codes and codes to the language. So how is it going to help you as a developer or maybe some other uh, roles such as business analyst is for developer is going to accelerate the development, how you're doing your development on system, especially from a coding perspective. And it's going to help you improve your testing life cycles, in some cases very significantly. And how it's going to help to business analysts and other people, we're going to see that in detail further in subsequent slides. Now, important to note is I'm going to divide this presentation into two parts. Today, we're going to talk a bit more about theory of what GitHub Copilot is, what goes behind the GitHub Copilot, what is the basis of it, and also how to install GitHub Copilot on your system in connection with the SAP app. And the next time, what we're going to do is dig deeper more towards hands-on, how GitHub Copilot helps you to drive your efficiency further. And there will probably be a little bit more other observations and parameters that I'll talk about in the subsequent session. And of course, at the end, we'll see about the competitors. So this time, we're just going to focus a bit more on theory, so to make sure your base is clear on what you're going to use in future. So uh, GitHub Copilot is nothing but another tool set in a large language model tools area or a generative AI area that we call it as. Maybe many of you have heard names such as GPT-3 that's coming from OpenAI. There is a Palm 2 model coming from Google. There is Llama coming from Meta, formerly known as Facebook. They do understand the human language and they can also create answers in a human specific language. So if you're going very specific questions, asking anything that you would like to understand to those models, they're gonna return back with more information around the questions that you're answering in your language. the baseline of LLMs on which the GitHub Copilot is based on is a massive amount of data. Although there is no information about which data sets are used to train these models, the large language models. However, we know for sure it's actually massive amount of data, hundreds of gigabytes of data we are talking about. And before we move ahead, what I would like to do is that somehow compare these large language models with chats. In past, we had those chatbots. Many of you may have used on many websites like bank websites, etc. You go and it says, do you want to talk with a robot, which is available 24 by 7. So when you ask some question, it responds to you. So that has been there for quite many years, right? And we have interacted and used it quite a lot. However, to explain LLM better, what I would like to do is divide this into two parts. How old chatbots were working and how LLM works. Hopefully that will give you better understanding. And to do that, what is better than drawing something? So here, let me just jump to my drawing. Now, here on left hand side is basically a chatbot and right hand side is a generative AI. Let me get the laser pointer. That really helps. Now, how chatbot, sorry, has been working is you have a database with some information that is available with you. And then on top of that, what you do is basically you write a logic layer, kind of a rule based or what if analysis, that if this is a question that is asked by a user, what should be your answer? If there are mistakes in the question, how should you react to that? So that logic layer basically is more or less created based on the rules. Uh, so that is this part. And this one is a UI, yeah. Like I said, if you go on many websites and you're talking with someone in the chat mode, many a times even in your company, probably you may have seen that if you need access to certain systems, you just say, okay, I need access to this system, and it creates a request behind and sends it to the approver. So that basically how the chatbot works. So in this case, you ask a question, query goes to the logic layer, it decides what information it needs to search from the database. It goes here, gets the information, fetches the answer, and responds to the user. This is working pretty well. Like I said, we have been using for a while. However, the responses are not that polished. It's not like as if you're talking with a person here. You do feel like it's as if you're talking with a robot, and they are not as user friendly as you would like it to be. So it's not mimicking a human, and you do not create a generic chatbot for all the use cases. So here there could be a use case of, say, a medical pharmaceutical company has a chatbot that will have a different logical layer as more like a one where you have a website for movies or movie booking. And that's why this cannot be a generic one. If you realize there are some mistakes, because you cannot just uh, think about every if and else scenario that user will write about when it asks questions, you keep you keep you have to keep changing or amending the logic until it is mature enough. It also doesn't understand the context very well, and I'll explain this context part a little later. But on positive side, it's a small built engine just for your purpose, and you can change it the way you want. Now, if we come to the LLM part that GitHub Copilot uses, you're straight away talking about a huge bunch of public data. In case of Git Copilot, it is a GitHub on which they train a powerful model to understand or to learn what is sitting here in all those websites. In our case, all the coding data or information. And that trained model is later used as an API from a user standpoint. So you ask any question, it goes to the trained model and it responds back. Again, when this trained model has information from the date when it was trained. So if any event or anything happened after the training was completed, of course, these models will not have that information. So that could be one of the limitation I can think of. However, they are trained on such a huge amount of data that you will always feel there is some meaningful information coming out of it. Now, on negative side, of course, it is trained on huge data. And if you would like to change it, uh, for some scenarios, you feel like the answers or responses are not pretty close to what you are anticipating or not precise enough, you retraining is or fine tuning sometimes can be an expensive job. Some on theory level, fine tuning is not that expensive if you compare with retraining, because you always have a flexibility to change certain parameters that a model gives, and you can change the input that you're passing to anticipate the correct output, and then you find a perfect hyperparameter. So that is always possible. However, none of that is quick as it was in ChatGPT, sorry, a chatbot scenario. Otherwise, this is more powerful than anything that we have seen so far. Maybe with an example, this will make more sense. So let's say I would like to, user is going to ask, can you recommend a restaurant nearby? That's what user is asking to the chatbot. Now bot is asking, what cuisine would you like to eat? Now user says, suddenly, what is the weather today? What do you think the chatbot will think? I don't understand. What is he talking about? We are this chatbot is prepared for food, and suddenly he's talking about weather. I have no logic written for that, and the chatbot will probably get completely confused, and it will probably, if there is a logic written, it will say, I do not understand. Can you repeat your question? And that's what chatbot does when it does not understand the context, because it's just working on a small amount of data that it has. However, if you go to the LLM, it goes pretty extensive. Imagine you ask the same question. Can you recommend a restaurant nearby? The Gen AI says, what cuisine would you like to eat? Including a suggestion, maybe Italian, Indian, Thai. And then user suddenly asks, what's the weather today? Now, it is intelligent enough to understand, oh, the context doesn't make sense because you're already talking about restaurant. So it's clever enough to say, I'm not sure about the weather, but I can help you find a great restaurant. What type of cuisine you are interested in? So you see, the models, when we say that the AI is becoming clever and clever, this is a best example to explain that. And this is what acts as a source of information for our uh, GitHub Copilot. Only thing is that here we are not talking about restaurant, we are talking about coding. Now, coming back to our presentation, we talked about massive amounts of data, but the basic principle is always predict the next word, nothing else. So you ask a question and the model works as if it wants to predict the next word, and it keeps predicting next word until you get your answer. And as simple as that, how the coding is done for the models. As an example, if you write just dog, it will automatically find out dog sits. But if you say dogs, it will find the answer as sit. That's how the English, that this is English perspective correct. And if you and this is how the model works. It tries to figure out only the next word that suits the previous word. Let's say you've written it's time to go to the dot dot. Then it will automatically figure out maybe store, office, or movies, and it will generate it as a suggestion. And it only on that it is doing based on the previous words that you have written. Same way, I have no interest dot 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 in hearing, in learning, in working. It figures that out based on the previous one. And this is what the power of LLM is. And imagine you're writing or you're using that powerful model under GitHub Copilot. In this case, it is GPT 3.5 Turbo. Now, we talked so much about the, 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 the thing that goes behind, right? What LLM is, what powers it, etc. Now, I would like to bring that little focus back to GitHub specific learning. That is what Copilot is about and how it's going to help us down the line. So, GitHub Copilot journey uh, for us as end users started from June 2021, where a technical preview of a Copilot was released. A technical preview means a service or software that is under active development and it's being tested. And its only purpose is to establish a feedback loop, allowing customers to influence its development and direction. And that's why they released that as a technical preview. In March, they released a technical preview for Visual Studio IDE, or sometimes also called VSC. So what they did is once you have a plugin or in the IDE, it's very easy to integrate something with a new feature like Copilot supporting your regular coding platform. Means if you highlight something and you ask questions about it to the chat of Copilot, they all work hand in hand and they complement each other. For SAP team members, IDEs are maybe Eclipse that we have been using for very long. Visual Studio is something similar. In June 2022, they launched they came out of technical preview, means it was rolled out or generally available in SAP terms to the public for usage. And I think today we only gonna talk about Visual Studio Code as a IDE for the subsequent subsequent learning. Now, I find these some of the facts very interesting about GitHub Copilot, and that's why I thought, why not just share with you? I found these lots of facts from surfing around and trying to figure out a bit more about it. So it would be interesting to know that the GitHub Copilot works most proficiently with Python. There are many reasons around it. In probably the next slide, you'll see why I think Python works proficiently uh, with Python. They also support JavaScript, Go, Perl, you name it. lots of open source language also, and not to forget ABAP, which is why we are here. Then uh, it's owned by GitHub, which is also owned by Microsoft and OpenAI. So they are working in partnership to develop this further for us. It is only trained with English language in mind on all public repositories of GitHub. So imagine what the amount of codes we have on GitHub that is used as a source. The IDEs we spoke about, that there is a Visual Studio Code IDE. Azure Data Studio IDE is also supported. JetBrains, Vim, NeoVim, if you have used it before, that's also where it is supported. Again, they are just to name few of them. And this fact is for me very interesting. It is estimated that uh, GitHub Copilot is trained on 159 gigabytes of GitHub code with about 53 million GitHub repos. Imagine the uh, how big this one is, and how clever, with so much data as a reference, how clever this can get. To give you some understanding, JavaScript has several thousand, 100,000 of thousands of projects on GitHub. Some of SAP people may not like it, but there are not that many ABAP projects on GitHub, estimated to be 200 to 300. Again, that's a rough estimate. So, so always with so much data as a reference for the language such as JavaScript, Python, your efficiency of the model improves. Whereas if you have less information as input, in such a case of SAP ABAP, it may not be at par with the other languages, which is okay. We just have to make sure that it serves the purpose that we want when it comes to SAP ABAP. Now, I just put this slide just to kind of for people who don't know SAP ABAP and they are just looking into this video for GitHub Copilot purpose. SAP ABAP is a high-level language that was designed by SAP long back, especially for designing and developing applications on the SAP environment. You can also say that this is more like a subset of SQL because it more many a times it uses the SQL syntax behind the scene. Now we talked about a lot of Copilot history, some facts about it, what ABAP is. Now, nextly, I would like to purely focus on what features GitHub Copilot provides us. To name a few, autocomplete the code. This is uh, this is just what I call it as. What this means is you're writing some comments in the code and code is automatically created by learning from your comment. That means it helps you to finish your code as fast as possible when you're writing one. In case of Python, I have statistics around when it was tested, around 50% of recommendations were correct in case of Python when the testing happened from model perspective. From my experience for SAP ABAP, it also helps you tremendously. We'll see that in the coming slides or session. Now it also has another feature of explaining what you're writing. So let's say you have 200 lines of code and you would like to quickly understand what is written there. It's like converting your code into an English language or understandable language. And that's also where business analysts and non-technical people get benefited. So in such cases also, it converts a code into a language. It also has a feature to generate test case scripts, which means you have written, say, a code, and you would like to test that code by calling it outside into other functions. Or in SAP ABAP case, you would like to call, a, let's say, a function module in a class-based test case. So what you would generally do is you will pass some parameters to the original code as an input, see what is returned as output, export parameters, and check that in whether that output matches with what is expected. So that is more like a generating test case. That is also done by reading the code by the Copilot. There is also a feature to fix the code. Although I must say that fixing the code works better with many other languages like Python, JavaScript. I had tested in case of ABAP, it did not impress me so far. So in this case, if you say make certain syntactical mistakes in the code, ideally expectation is that it will correct that. But I found it doesn't quite behave like that in many of the scenarios. Now we're going to see all these features, at least the first three, in the next video. How they look like and what how mature they are. But before we do anything on the system, what I would like to focus on installation steps. Maybe in fact we will go through those installation steps with you today. So the first important thing is installing a Visual Studio Code in our system. So in case you do not have, install Visual Studio Code. You can find Visual Studio Code on the Visual Studio website. Depending on your operating system, you can install whichever one is applicable for you. Once you have a Visual Studio Code open and available on your system, installed and available on your system, the next thing that you do is install a GitHub Copilot extension. Maybe let's check the GitHub Copilot VSC. This one is the wrong thing. So what generally happens is, this is how VSC looks like. On left hand side, you will see something called extensions here. And what you would do is you would type GitHub Copilot. As I have installed it already, uh, it's probably not gonna install again. However, in your case, you just need to install that, and that's pretty much it. Still, you do not have access to the GitHub Copilot. So what you would need to do is subscribe for the GitHub Copilot. And that you can do, let me go back here, on the GitHub Copilot website. You just have to search in Google GitHub Copilot and this page will appear. And here there are lots of options. There is something for business, enterprise, and there is something called individual. As we are learning together, it of course makes sense to go for an individual one. Here you can start a free trial. Then the next page will take you to some personal information. It will ask, and it will also ask you for a credit card, etc. However, it will not charge you until a month's period is over. So first month is free, which you can really use for your purpose to learn the technology. In my case, I've installed it, so this will not lead me anywhere. Many times what happens is, if you don't have any user ID in GitHub itself, it will ask you to create that, but that's something you can anyway do. Once the installation is subscription is done, the next step is install ABAP remote file system extension on VSC. So now we need to think that, okay, we have a VSC, but to open and interact with ABAP server in Visual Studio Code, you need some extension. And that's what we want to do. Because in Eclipse case, you have those tools made available by SAP to be able to interact with all your ABAP developments or any other embedded analytics or SAP developments, such as BW. But in this case, you need something. And for our requirement, something called ABAP remote file system comes handy. This one. So this one is designed by Marcelo. It's free of cost, license. Anyone can use for any purpose. This one you can install in your VSC. As it is installed in my case, you will not see any difference. There is a lot of how to written here down. You can go through that. There are more or less some. There is also wiki written on more information around that, how to perform certain activities, prerequisite, etc. However, we cover some important parts in our session today itself. Once you have installed ABAP Remote's file system, the next step is activating the SICF in ADT, of ADT. I think all SAP colleagues will know what SICF stands for. It's a transaction in SAP system that you would like to connect your VSC with. So you just go through SICF transaction, enter ADT that you see here, and there will be two services that will be visible. Most of the times they are active because you're also using ABAP development tools for Eclipse development by default. So they are active, but you can just check and activate them. Also important to mention is that for this file system to work, make sure you have ABAP tools installed for Eclipse, because it does use that. I think that's also visible in the wiki section of this extension. Once you have done SICF activation, here you also, if you right click on this one and check the service name, you will get that web service of particular SICF service. I'll tell you how that helps. So now let's go quickly here. You need to go to the settings. Here there is something called, at the bottom there is something called settings. At the down here you click on this one, something like this one opens, and here on the top you just need to write setting again. So setting and setting again. There is something called edit in settings JSON. Once you click on that, it will open this page, and this is where you need to write this particular string, where you can mention the name of the system that you're connecting. That's a text URL. So this is the URL where you have a service URL and there is a port here. And that's something you will get from this SICF transaction that I was talking about. Then put username, password, client, language, etc. Save it, and then you're done for this settings section. Now with this all steps done, you will be ready for using Git Copilot for any SAP ABAP developments that we will see in the next session. Now, coming back to our presentation, you also see there are two additional boxes here. One is by using ABAP Git, and there is something called transpiler. So this ABAP remote file system, as I said, is another extension that allows us to connect to the ABAP server of SAP and then make the changes online in the system. But if you there are some other two other options such as ABAP Git. Many of you may have heard it's quite widely used. ABAP Git supports you to connect ABAP repository to the Git, you- uh, GitHub or Git, as in short form it's called, and you can put IDE on top of that and use a Copilot on top of that. So many people will feel not comfortable with this. This is one way. However, I have not explored personally that option. Only theoretically, this information is available. Something to check for. Or if you're just not ready with any of those options, you can always convert your ABAP code into JS code, and JS code is very easily editable when it comes to VSC IDE that we just saw, and Copilot can be integrated there. However, for me, this one is easy. I've seen that it is quite helpful to interact with this extensions. I'm going to just talk about that down the line. Before we go further, it's important to note a few things about a Copilot. That a chat in Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio is now available. That means we can use a chat GPT kind of chat box in the Visual Studio Code in our scenario. In JetBrain IDE that I was talking about earlier, the chat is not openly available. It is still in the preview mode. They anticipate to be released this year. What else is in the preview mode is if you want to use a in CLI, you would like to enable a Copilot for your custom developments. That is not also publicly available. They are also launching in this year Copilot Enterprise for a big enterprises who would like to roll it out for bigger audience or bigger developer community. For that subscription, they are going to also give you to possibility to customize the fine-tuned models that are running behind the Copilot, which is quite handy if you're coming from AI ML background. You get access to change certain parameters so that you can just tune it to best of your necessity. That is still a win-win situation. So I'm looking forward that feature when it comes out. Now, this is all about the theory of Copilot. I wouldn't say all about it, but it's what gives you a good introduction about Git. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna brush upon the architecture today, and next time we're gonna meet and talk further about the architecture as well as we're gonna do some hands-on. So the GitHub Copilot works on a model called Codex that was designed by OpenAI. So the Codex was trained based on the public code and text on the internet, and that is further used and launched as a GitHub Copilot service. As I said, in this case, it's all trained on a GitHub. I would rather call it as a fine-tuned model on GPT 3.5 Turbo that we have used in the past. So what basically they did is they tuned it so that it fits to the coding requirements more than as we saw in chatbot restaurant requirement or a weather requirement. So what we do is the GitHub service, Copilot service that is fetching information from these models, and this is a Visual Studio in our scenario code, which is basically interacting with this service as an API behind the scene, and they work quite in tandem. Yeah. So generally, when I look at the architecture, I always want to give more information about how OpenAI, ChatGPT, sorry, GitHub Copilot works. Sorry, I always use ChatGPT word. This you cannot expect this to act as a end-to-end coding assistance. You whenever you have a problem, what you generally do is you have two steps. One is you divide a problem into smaller problems. That is dividing a big code into small codes, a logical way. And then you would like to map those small codes or sections with something that is available in the model. That is, there are standard, say, libraries, there are standard syntax, there are syntax from ABAP around all the all the ideal way to do the coding, and that part will be done by ChatGPT Copilot in our scenario. So it's not going to break down the big problems into small problems for you. What it's going to do is that it's going to map those simple problems to the existing codes that it is trained on, and that's where the Copilot is most effective. So that's to just set the expectations right. GitHub Copilot also coming with a new generation model called, they call it Copilot X. I think they're gonna make this Codex model obsolete because now they have a next generation Copilot X, which is working on GPT-4. However, not all features are available there. They have released some features only. There is a big blog written around that. However, we not go in that detail, but it's just good to know that there is something next generation coming up. If I remember right, they are fine tuning it to make it easier for developers to create those CI/CD related process more effectively. So this architecture, basically, if you understand what's going behind it, it's just easy to imagine how to how a technology works. Now, I also would like to talk about Codex performance in general, about Python, especially because on Python they did a lot of testing where they created this whole Codex model. Uh, uh, it's not like that it is only tested on Python, that's why it won't work on anything else. So you have a GitHub, and GitHub has lots of coding. You have a model that's just going to scan through all of that data and it's going to learn from it. So we cannot just say that because the Python is basis of testing, that means it is not working for other languages. In fact, there are very positive reviews from JavaScript and other open source languages with the codex in mind. However, as we are running late for this, I mean, we already have spent a lot of time on the theory. What we're gonna do is that we're gonna stop here. Next video, we're gonna start with completely hands-on, and we'll just touch base little bit again on the performance of the codex, how the technology, what is the technology behind that, how they did the testing when they created this model, how they realized that okay, this codex model is doing a good job or not. We're going to talk a bit more about that. I've also created some personal evaluation of how much percentage of time is saved for certain sections uh, of auto completion or explaining the code or fixing the code. We're going to talk about that and a little bit more about the other competitors also. However, uh, I'm going to stop here. Thanks for listening. Hope it is helpful for you. And if you like it, click the like button, subscribe it. I'm gonna meet you next time. Until next time, thank you and see you.